Are there questions or discussions on the motion? Hearing nothing further, this is agenda item number 7. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 8.
Move for the approval to submit the 2018 Emergency Management Performance Grant application to PEMA, subject to solicitor's approval.
Second the motion.
There's a motion and a second. Tim Boyce, the Director of our Emergency Services Department, is here, and can you describe for the council and the public what this agenda item pertains to?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, member of councils. The Emergency Management Performance Grant is a grant awarded by FEMA to county emergency managers that can subject themselves to testing and certification. This year we conducted a number of exams, field exercises, and training programs, and we are eligible to submit for reimbursement of partial of my salary. That's what this grant is asking for.
And what is the amount that we can apply for?
We can apply for up to $50,000 in reimbursement.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion, further discussion or questions for Mr. Boyce? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, there's a number of significant emergencies underway in Delaware County. Do you need me to state?
No, please.
Okay, thank you very much.
Item number 9.
Move for the approval of agreements, contracts, and amendments with the Office of Workforce Development as per the attached agreement, subject to solicitor's approval.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second the motion.
Is there any discussion or questions? We recognize Mr. John Daly, who is the Director of our Office of Workforce Development. I know we had the opportunity to discuss this yesterday at the agenda meeting. He did describe the nature of the one agreement that's attached. Is there further discussion or questions for Mr. Daly on this item? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 10 is the consideration of appointments of members to the Board of Elections for a 2-year term ending January 2020. I believe we probably have multiple nominations. So what I would perhaps suggest, subject to council, is we consider doing it in 2 phases. The first is the 2 members that would be the majority members, and then the second phase would be the 1 member that would be the minority member. So at this time, I would entertain any nominations for the 2 majority members of the election board.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. I would like to nominate Jerry Lawrence and Elaine Schaefer to represent the Democratic Party on the Board of Elections.
I second the motion.
There's a nomination for Mr. Lawrence and Ms. Schaefer. Are there any further nominations?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. We nominate Mr. Joseph Pizzeni and Mr. Gerald Lawrence.
Okay, Mr. Lawrence has been nominated. Is there a second to the nomination of Mr. Pizzeni?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Are there any further nominations for the 2 majority positions on the Board of Elections? Is there discussion on that motion?
Mr. Chairman, I guess I would like a point of clarification. Do you intend to abstain from consideration of Mr. Pizzenti's candidacy?
No.
It was my understanding that Schwartz and Campbell, your law firm, has represented and/or represents Mr. Pizzenti, and that you personally represent Mr. Pizzenti. Is that not the case?
There was a time, I believe it was either 2 or 3 years ago, when Mr. Pizzenti was represented by Schwartz Campbell. We wrote 1 letter on his behalf, and we were not compensated for that, and we have had no further representation nor any prospect of representation of Mr. Pizzenti's company at that point. I was aware of this, and I did ask Mr. Madron pursuant to the Public Employees and Officials Ethics Act to render me an opinion about whether or not it would be a conflict of interest. And I'll ask Mr. Manager if he can state what his findings were.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did research the Public Officials and Employees Ethics Act on this issue. That act defines conflict of interest primarily as one where there would be some pecuniary benefit to a business involving a member, the member himself, or a member of the, a member of that member's individual family, immediate family, rather. Having looked at this, there was no pecuniary benefit at all to Schwartz Campbell since it was never compensated. Neither Mr. Vicente nor any business in which he's involved, as was represented to me, is currently a client of Schwartz Campbell, nor is there any promise or likelihood that as a result of any vote today, Mr. Vicente or any business in which he is involved would become a client of Schwartz Campbell. So there's really no pecuniary benefit to be derived should Mr. McLean support Mr. Vicente. So I do not see a conflict of interest that would preclude that support.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Just to be clear, when you say a letter was written, you wrote the letter on behalf of Schwartz Campbell.
I did.
And it was my understanding that Mr. Vicente, previously in his role as the president of, as the Republican president of the Aston Borough Council, retained Schwartz Campbell as the solicitor for Aston. Is that not the case?
Well, Mr. Vicente did not retain us. Mr. Vicente was a board member, Board of Commissioners of the Aston Township a number of years ago, and Schwartz Campbell has been the solicitor for Aston Township for a number of years. So he did serve on the board while Schwartz Campbell was the solicitor.
And voted in favor of Schwartz Campbell being the solicitor on numerous occasions.
Well, I don't know about numerous occasions, but it was likely that he did so at some point in the past. I don't recollect what his vote was, all I presume it was affirmative.
Does Schwartz Campbell often represent individuals for no remuneration?
Schwartz Campbell does do pro bono work. I recall this instance being something where Mr. Vicente contacted us, and he was having a difficulty with the municipality and asked us to write a cease and desist letter, which we did that particular day. Nothing further came of it. To my knowledge, we never heard anything more again back. And all these things I certainly could have clarified for you, Mr. Zidek, that you had spoken to me about prior to today's meeting.
I suppose it's a two-way street. Should you have wished to clarify your involvement in Schwartz Campbell's previously, you could have offered that to me prior to today's meeting.
Well, I could take the steps under the Ethics Act to clarify those issues.
As did I. I researched the Ethics Act as well. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, my concerns with Mr. Vicente's candidacy for the Board of Elections stem primarily from what is stated in the Home Rule Charter, and specifically Section 421. The line, if I can read this out loud, the board shall consist of 2 appointees representing the party with the largest total vote cast for a seat on council in the most recent municipal election, and 1 appointee representing the party with the second ranking total vote cast in the most recent municipal election. And so the key wording there would be 2 appointees representing the party with the largest total vote cast. I don't think there's any doubt, as you said I think earlier, that would be the Democratic Party. So we're talking about 2 people representing the party. So my concerns are that when we circulated this letter prior to the meeting, I have in hand a letter from the chairman of the Delaware County Democratic Party, David Landau, who was democratically elected to speak on behalf of the party. When he writes to us saying, I understand that Joseph Vicente may be nominated to the Board of Elections. Please be advised the Delaware County Democratic Committee does not consider him to be a representative of the party and does not support his appointment. I have a problem considering him as being a representative of the Democratic Party. I further have an issue, and I did get a chance to speak with Mr. Pacini yesterday. He seems like a very good person. He's served his community for a long period of time. So none of what I'm going to say is really, in any way a diminishment of his character. But when I asked him, how his interest in the Board of Elections came forth, his answer was that he got a call from Chairman Andy Riley from the Republican Party asking him if he'd be interested in serving on the Board of Elections. It's hard for me to think through any sense of common sense that this is someone who represents the Democratic Party. So I would push forth that he is not someone who is qualified to serve on the Board of Elections per Section 421.
And just for clarification, this Mr. Andy Riley is a partner at Schwartz Campbell as well.
Mr. Madden, I did get a copy of a letter from Mr. Landau, the chairman of the Delco Democrats as well, but my letter does not reference anything regarding dissenting not being supported by.
I didn't get that right.
I can share this with you. I thought this was.
There's a copy of the letter.
It's 2 sentences, so one take you want to.
We were just provided with the one.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I thought it was circulated. Whether it was circulated or not, my opposition stands on these grounds.
Thank you.
And with that in mind, I see that we have 2 people who have, and this letter was circulated, have been affirmatively stated as representing the Democratic Party per the chairman, David Landau. I believe that letter was circulated this morning. Okay. Again, it's a short letter. I couldn't put on something that's a 10-page memo, but 2 sentences, I think. An hour is sufficient time.
Is there further discussion on the nominations?
I guess I'd seek better clarification from the other members as to whether and if they have objections to the individuals nominated to represent the Democratic Party, those individuals who the Democratic Party has said would represent them. I'd like to better understand if there are issues with those folks, what they might be.
Elaine Paul Schaefer, I've known a few times. She seems very partisan to me. Seems like a very nice lady, partisan. Everyone can laugh, but that's my opinion and my vote. That's fine.
So the concern is that she's perhaps unduly partisan, Mr. Cole?
Correct.
Would you entertain a nomination of another candidate who you perhaps would find less partisan?
Mr. Zidek, I believe I've made a motion for the candidates I want. That's on the table, and that's what I'm going to stand behind.
I didn't think there was a motion. I think there were some
I
nominations.
believe I made a nomination, and I apologize.
That's okay. And it wasn't. I didn't mean to be argumentative. I was honestly trying to address a concern that you had, where you said that you thought one of the nominees that we put forth was too partisan, and I'm offering the possibility of offering another nominee that you might find less partisan, who also would be deemed to represent the Democratic Party.
And my nomination stands as it is, Mr. Zidek. Thank you for it.
Mr. Cole, just so I understand your concerns. So when you say that you're concerned about partisanship being reflected in any nominations, does that stand just to the Board of Elections, or would that be to any other commissions or other such boards?
Well, I think it was you that said you're going to consider a party perspective when you view any of these nominations for anyone on a committee in your private statement. So
I'm trying to understand.
Well, I'm just going to.
So
You obviously have that same perspective.
my perspective was that it'd be representative of the community, and it's a bipartisan community.
Correct. And I made my nominations and it'll stand where it is.
Okay, but to be clear, when I read from the Humboldt Charter, we need to consider someone who shall be representing the Democratic Party. So inherent in that, there is going to be some degree of partisanship. I mean, they need to represent the Democratic Party.
Correct.
In previous years, I'm not to suppose that you also had similar concerns about someone who had any affiliation to a party to be nominated to Board of Elections.
Are you suggesting Mr. Presenti is not a member of the Democratic Party?
I think we're saying he doesn't represent the Democratic Party.
That's right.
Is he not a member of the Democratic Party, Mr. Presiding?
I don't know.
I mean, if he's not, I'll withdraw my nomination.
I'm just saying I have a letter from the chairman saying he doesn't represent the Democratic Party.
My understanding was...
Go ahead, I reckon this is go to orderly here, Mr. Zidek, go ahead.
Yeah, and by all means, if I'm speaking over somebody, I apologize.
We were all starting to talk together at once, so we're trying to...
My understanding of Mr. Pacenti in particular was that he served as a Republican council person for Aston and then switched his party registration perhaps in 2010. And he very well may be a member of the Democratic Party, and by all means, I think he's welcome. But neither, as I sit here, I don't have the authority to say who necessarily represents the Democratic Party. We look to the leader of the Democratic Party to inform us as to who the Democratic Party feels is representing them. And when we sought such clarification, that person, Mr. Landau, the chairman of the Democratic Party of Delaware County, said that Mr. Pacenti was not representative. And the point was driven home, perhaps by Mr. Pacenti himself, when he explained that his request to serve on the Board of Elections came at the request of the chairman of the Republican Party of Delaware County.
And my concern with the notion that the fact that he is a member of the Democratic Party, to say that he's registered as a Democrat, and to conflate that with being a representative of the Democratic Party, that's my concern. Because if you take that logic one step further, any registered voter in Delaware County, and the bar is pretty low to do this, to switch their party representation to Democrat, would then pass this standard within the Board of Elections, Section 421 of the Charter. And so to take it to the extreme, Andy Riley, the chairman of the Republican Party, or any former chairman of the Republican Party, could very easily switch their registration and therefore qualify to be appointed as a representative of the Democratic Party. And that, again, that just flies in the face of common sense to me, that that's what was intended with this section of the Home Rule Charter.
I guess one other point I'd like to make regarding this is that when I read Section 421 and when I look at the Administrative Code, Section 668B, it speaks of the fact that the party who got the second highest vote total in the most recent election is able to put forth 3 names that County Council is then to choose from to represent that party. If you read these clauses together, or these sentences together, it's strange credulity to suggest that 2 years ago, when the Democrats did not win the most recent county council election, Chairman Landau was able to say, look, you can only pick from one of these 3 people. And yet now, having won the election, his ability, or the Democratic Party's ability to have representatives on the Board of Elections is now less than it was 2 years ago. That just doesn't make any sense at all, and I think we'd save all of us a lot of time and energy to kind of come to our senses, and as many people came and spoke yesterday, to do the right thing here. We live in a time when the rule of law is under attack all the time. We question the authority of the FBI, of the CIA. We watch out for foreign powers who are meddling in our elections. And for us here in Delaware County to play partisan games with a Board of Elections that is meant to secure the integrity of this electoral process, I think is appalling.
And my concern is, we've been elected to serve under the powers that are given to us under the Home Rule Charter. I mean, it's fundamental that we follow the Home Rule Charter. And so to violate explicitly who is to be considered for an appointment to something as important as the Board of Elections, that's a pretty critical threshold to pass. And so I vociferously have a problem with appointing someone who, by the Home Rule Charter, is not qualified to serve.
Do you have any further comment?
I don't.
Any
No further comments,
council? I reserve my comments to the end. I think that when you talk about somebody that's not qualified or done that, I respectfully state that, Mr. Zidek and Mr. Bannon, you bastardized the interpretation of the Home Rule Charter. The provisions that relate to both the the provisions that relate to both the appointment of members of the Board of Elections and appointments by council in general are pretty clear. 2 members shall be representative of the political party that got the most votes, and so that means Democrats in the last election. 1 member shall be a minority party member, and for this particular cycle, that means the Republican Party. The Home Rule Charter specifically states that council shall appoint 2 majority members. And the Home Rule Charter specifically states that the minority member shall be nominated, 1 of 3 people to be nominated by the chairman of the minority party. The Home Rule Charter doesn't speak at all to any nominations to be made by the chairman of the majority party. And in my discussions with both Mr. Madden and Mr. Zidek, this seems to have shifted. At first I was told that I was obligated to simply accept whoever the chairman of the Democratic Party was nominated, that was what the Home Rule Charter says and meant, and I disagreed with that. Then I was told by the members that, well, it's not the chairman of the Democratic Party's choice, it should be our choice as the successful candidates. So the chairman of the party doesn't matter, it's really us that are nominating individuals. Now I hear again today from Mr. Zidek that he and Mr. Madden don't speak for the Democratic Party, that we are obligated to accept the nomination from the Democratic chairman, and that plainly does not state what the Home Rule Charter states. And I agree with him. We have had the rule of law under attack here in Pennsylvania and in the United States. And that interpretation as proposed by Mr. Mack and Mr. Zidek and Mr. Madden would only further attack that rule of law. What I look for when I consider these candidates is I want individuals who will be fair to Republicans and fair to Democrats. Mr. Lawrence is somebody that I can vote for and I can say is fair. Mr. Lawrence has served on our Board of Elections. He has certainly been a longtime Democrat. He is the son of a former Democratic governor of Pennsylvania. And I believe he holds a position in the National Committee of the Democratic Party. But nonetheless, I have observed Mr. Lawrence do his job on the Board of Elections, and I have always thought him to be fair. And therefore, I'll say I am supportive of Mr. Lawrence's nomination. Somebody that has been suggested by the Democratic members here. When I look at Ms. Schaefer, I have expressed previously that I did have concerns regarding, and this is not a criticism of her, but just simply a recognition of the positions that she has held in the community, a highly partisan individual, who has taken aggressive stances, and I would be afraid that that would not be the hallmark of fairness. I have been able to observe Mr. Pacini over a number of years, as Mr. Zidek has pointed out. And I have seen Mr. Pacini as a commissioner. I have seen Mr. Pacini work in many municipalities throughout the county. We have had the ability to interact with Mr. Pacini here at the county level as he works for different municipalities on finances when it comes to grants and those sorts of things. I think Mr. Pacini brings a different perspective to the Board of Elections, whereas the other nominees are all attorneys from areas such as Haverford, Radnor, and Nether Providence. Mr. Pacini is an accountant from Aston Township, who also does a significant amount of work in the eastern part of our county, and I believe has a very good grasp on working with individuals in all parts of our county. And through his ability to do his municipal work, he's been someone that understands the needs of the community. I think he would be responsive to both parties in terms of fairness, because he does work for both sides. It was presented to me that, oh, well, Ms. Schaefer will be fair. She's taken a new position where she is the director of a nonprofit, but in some of those positions, some of that work, she does lobbying work. So therefore, she won't make the Republicans mad, and she won't make the Democrats mad in those types of positions. Well, I recognize, as Mr. Pacini is somebody that does work in municipalities that are governed by both Republicans and Democrats, that I believe he would be somebody that would be even-handed and fair on the Board of Elections. And those are the qualities that I look for in casting my vote for who should be on there. I don't know who solicited Mr. Pacini to submit his resume. If Mr. Madden, you state that's what he told you, I believe you. I have had no conversation, was unaware of that until today. But nonetheless, I've known Mr. Pacini for a number of years, and I think he is somebody that will be representative and fair. I think what has gone on in Pennsylvania over these last several weeks and months is disgraceful when it comes to the partisan rigging of election districts by one side and the other. So I think above all else, when we talk about the three individuals who will rule on election matters as we go forward here in Delaware County, especially this year, I'm looking to place people in those positions that will be fair to all residents of Delaware County, not a specific nominee of a particular party, but somebody that will be fair. So that's my comment on that matter.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment back on one of the first points you made, and I want to be very clear. I don't speak on behalf of the Democratic Party. I was elected out of Delaware County to represent on county council. I speak only for myself. I don't speak for the Democratic Party. In the office that I was elected to serve in, I am to carry forth with what powers I'm given, and one of which is to appoint, as you are, someone to the Board of Elections that qualifies as representing the Democratic Party. David Landau, the chairman of the Democratic Party, has been elected to speak on behalf of the Democratic Party as to who represents or doesn't represent the Democratic Party. And so, I want to be clear. I'm not saying, you said there's been a situation where Brian...
Just for our record, I just want to clarify.
Maybe we could let Mr. Madden finish.
Well, I just want to...
Let me, if I could finish.
Go ahead.
So again, I'm choosing amongst those who are qualified per the Home Rule Charter as representing the Democratic Party. I'm choosing amongst them to appoint to the Board of Elections. What I'd also like to add is that there is another person who I would like to move to for consideration of the Board of Elections. Her name is Tricia Hall. I have circulated her resume prior to this meeting. I think it was circulated last week. This is someone, within your personal conscience, it's important that we appoint people who don't have too much of a track record of serving in roles as a Democrat or a Republican. This is someone who has never held an office as a Democrat or Republican. She's a capable, very experienced attorney who has shown interest in election law. She's volunteered on election days to monitor for any violations of election law, but she's certainly someone who, despite the fact that she is a registered Democrat, and I have a letter which I think has been circulated from Mr. Chairman David Landau, stating, I'm going to find it here. I understand you'll be nominating Jared Lawrence and Tricia Hall for appointments to the Board of Elections. The county charter requires the majority of the Board of Elections to be from the political party that won the most votes in the most recent county council election. The Delaware County Democratic Committee strongly supports these individuals for appointments to the Board of Elections. Both of these individuals are outstanding choices and will serve with distinction. So as far as I'm concerned, we have three people who meet the criteria as representing the Democratic Party: Gerald Lawrence, Tricia Hall, and Elaine Schaefer. Those are the only three that we have for consideration that have been put forth as representing the Democratic Party per Section 421. Voting for anyone else who is not on that list of three would be in violation of the Delaware County Code.
And just for clarification, Mr. McLean, you said that on several occasions that David Landau has nominated these individuals today. That is not the case. I just sat here 10 minutes ago and nominated Jerry Lawrence and Elaine Schaefer, and Mr. Madden just nominated Ms. Tricia Hall. To say that David Landau has nominated these people to serve on the Board of Elections is no more true than it would be to say that Andy Riley had nominated Mr. Ponsetti to serve to represent the Democratic Party. And I'll also say, I'm not sure you can actually use respectfully and bastardize in the same sentence. They seem to be in conflict.
I don't believe that if I said Mr. Landau nominated these individuals at the meeting today, obviously that is not correct.
No, not at the meeting today. You said he nominated them.
Right, but he nominated them to you. And I believe what I heard from both Mr. Zidek and now from Mr. Madden, their position is, so you believe that I am obligated to vote for whoever the chairman of the Democratic Party tells me to vote for.
No, sir.
Nobody's saying that.
I'm saying that we are obligated to vote for whoever is per your conscience. However, someone who meets the criteria that represents the Democratic Party. And the only person who I can think of, who's been democratically elected to speak on behalf of the Democratic Party would be their chairman, which is consistent with, I'm sorry, but one moment. When we get to the minority seat, this is someone who, again, the Home Rule Charter seems to consider the chairman of a party to be the person who's best capable of putting forth people who represent that party. I'm just viewing through consistency that the chairman of the Democratic Party would be the person who says this person does or does not represent the party.
You want to substitute into the charter language that you would agree with, but you're telling me that the only people that I may vote for here today, for the majority members, are the people that showed up on the letter from the chairman of the party.
I'm saying is those who have been stated as representing the Democratic Party, and someone who affirmatively been stated
yes.
does not represent the Democratic Party.
I think we might make more progress if we try a little less hard to put words in each other's mouths. We can read back the minutes as to what Mr. Madden said or what I said if you need clarification as to what we've said. But I think that in the absence of a vote in favor of either Barry Lawrence, Tricia Hall, or Elaine Schaefer, we would violate and a vote in favor of Mr. Ponsetti, that would violate the Home Rule Charter and the Administrative Code because we would have failed to appoint somebody to the Board of Election who represents the Democratic Party. You don't have to vote for them, but if you vote, but if council does not appoint somebody who's representing the Democratic Party, it will have violated the Home Rule Charter and the Administrative Code.
Well, that's your personal opinion, Mr.
Of course.
Zidek, and I would perhaps ask the members, if you take that position in years past, in any years past, were you able to research whether or not the chairman of the Republican Party issued such a directive to the county council before about the appointment of majority members?
There's no directive here. This is a letter that is an explanation that these people represent the Democratic Party. Let me finish speaking.
No, I'm not going to let you speak because you cut into what I was speaking about.
I'm sorry, I thought you were done.
I thought there was a question, Mr. Chairman. I was just answering your question.
No, you told me that unless I do anything other than what I've been instructed to on this letter, that I will be in violation of the Home Rule Charter. And I'm simply asking whether you have researched whether or not on any occasion in the past, the chairman of the majority party in the past has issued such a letter, recommendation, or directive to the members of the county council.
I appreciate the question, if I could, Mr. Madden. I'm not here to be cross-examined. I don't have to answer questions you ask.
You asked me many questions here.
And you don't have to answer them. You can or choose not to. But I would like to say this is not a directive. This is simply an explanation that these individuals represent the Democratic Party. It is information for you to consider when casting your vote. It's not a directive saying you have to cast this vote. It's not it's not David Landau or anybody from the Democratic Party saying you must act in such a fashion. I don't suppose there was a directive ever because there's not a directive today. I can't imagine anybody giving a directive to county council as to what to do.
So this is information, I'm sorry, let me clarify one thing, Mr. Zidek said. So this is information that I may consider in casting my vote here today.
Of course.
Okay?
Mr. Chairman, to answer your question of prior, I was not serving on county council at a prior point at which people were up for appointment. So I couldn't have asked at that time whether or not the chairman of that party affirmatively says a person represents or does not represent. So that's the onus on the people who made those appointments to determine in their conscience whether they were following or not following
But you've been able to research many items that have occurred prior to your time on council, extensive data, you've been able to obtain and ask for. So that was my question about whether or not you've ever looked to see, research whether or not this same type of process was used before.
Well, I have not looked back to see if other members of county council had asked whether or not an appointment is supported by the chairman of the majority party.
I can state that in my time on council, there has never been some either letter directive or nomination that came from the chairman of the majority party in the past.
What I would also guess is that we probably never had a situation in prior years where we have a letter in front of us that explicitly states from the chairman of the Democratic Party or the majority party that a person that's under consideration is not considered to be a representative of that party. So I think this is new grounds, and to ignore such a letter from the chairman of the party that is majority, I think is a pretty strong thing to do.
Is there any further discussion on the nominations? So ask perhaps Ms. Coogan to call the roll and ask each member to cast a vote for up to 2 members for the majority party.
I'm sorry, I'd like to make a motion to approve Ms. Elaine Schaefer and Mr. Jerry Lawrence for appointment to the Board of Elections.
Well, there's multiple
Second motion.
nominations that are already for the motion's
Can I
already
make
pending.
I can make a motion. It's just a point of...
Procedurally, when you have multiple nominations, the proper procedure is to have either each member vote for the nominees of their choosing, or to go through each nominee and have each member vote on each nominee.
Where would I find that procedure?
Robert's rules.
And can you explain to me why Robert's Rules governs our procedures here today?
Robert's rules governs our meetings in
How
Pennsylvania.
would you like to cast your vote, Mr. Zidek?
I would like us, for Mr. Madden, to be able to make a motion to nominate 2 individuals, have us vote on those, and entertain other motions should we fail to come to an agreement on a motion.
Mr. Zidek, I think that Mr. Madden already made that motion earlier to nominate Lawrence and Schaefer, and then Mr. Culp made a motion to nominate Lawrence and Pacini. And then Mr. Madden made a motion to nominate Hall, or, I'm sorry, one of the 2 we did. So I'm tracking that we currently have nominated by motion and seconded a Lawrence, a Schaefer, a Hall, and a Pacini.
I'm personally okay with proceeding as you suggest.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
I don't understand the fear of having to vote, but if there is such a fear, then by all means, I don't want to scare anybody.
We're not scared. We're calling for the vote.
What
Vote for 2 people.
What is the vote? How are we doing this again? I'm kind of confused.
To state here, there's 4 people nominated for 2 positions, so I suggest by roll call, have each council member cast their vote for the 2 that they choose. These are the majority members.
So I'm going to call each member and ask them to cast their vote for 2 of the ones that were the motions and the nominations. Okay, so Mr. Zidek, who are your,
I would vote for Ms. Elaine Schaefer and Mr. Jerry Lawrence.
Mr. Matty,
I would vote for Ms. Elaine Schaefer and Mr. Jerry Lawrence as well.
Mr. Culp,
I will vote for Gerald Lawrence and Joe Pacini.
Mrs. Marone,
I will vote for Mr. Pacini and abstain from a second vote.
Mr. McBlain,
I would vote for Mr. Lawrence and Mr. Pacini. So I think that reflects that Mr. Lawrence received 4 votes and Mr. Pacini received 3 votes. We'll move on to the consideration of the minority member of the election board. As per the home rule charter, we have received 3 individuals from which we're obligated to choose. Mr. Carmen Belafonte, Mr. Jim Flandro, and Ms. Carol Miller. So is there a motion to appoint any of those individuals to the Board of Elections?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Carmen Belafonte.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe I've received a resume of Mr. Carmen Belafonte, but if I could just ask, I mean, in the nature, with concerns about partisanship and whatnot, if anyone up here is capable of discussing for me his prior involvement, I'd be appreciated before I decide whether to vote yea or nay.
I'll speak for myself. Mr. Belafonte has been on the election board for a number of years. I think if you have observed any of his work, he has been very much respected. I think if you consult with Mr. Lawrence, you'll find that Mr. Lawrence believes that he's well respected and has done a good job. He is a practicing attorney of some note, so I certainly would have invited you to reach out to Mr. Belafonte to ask him any further questions.
And I have spoken to him in the past, but it just what I haven't asked him, and I'm asking if anyone knows, is has he served in an elected office or in any sort of a committeeship as a member of the Republican Party?
I'm not aware he served in any office in the Republican Party. I don't know whether or not Mr. Belafonte has served in other public office. It very well may be that many years ago he served on some school board or local commissioner or something like that. And my knowledge and my practice and my time as an attorney in media has not been in an elected office that I can recall. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to appoint Carmen Belafonte say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
So, 4-1.
Yes, I was trying to be respectful of the home rule charter.
Okay, thank you. So turning to item number 11 on our agenda.
Move for the approval to reappoint the following individuals to the Delaware County Planning Commission for a 4-year term to expire January 2022.
Second the motion.
The motion and the second.
I don't know if the motion contained the names of the individuals, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry. The first name is Thomas J. Judge of Darby Township and Kathy Bogajian of Radnor Township.
So there was a motion and a second. Well, I guess is there a second to the full motion? So motion and second. Is there discussion on the motion? We have Ms. Hill, the director of our planning department, here today to answer any questions regarding the nature of the service or the planning commission.
I suppose I wanted to raise a question about Mr. Judge's nomination, especially in light of Mr. Culp's concerns about partisanship. It's my understanding that Mr. Judge receives $250 a month from the Delaware County GOP Finance Committee for a car expense, and that in order to receive such a payment pursuant to PA's campaign finance laws, the activity racking up mileage regarding that car must be to influence the outcome of an election. It would strike me that we would be hard pressed to find somebody short of the chairman of the parties to be more partisan than somebody who is required by law to influence the outcome of an election. So I guess I would like to offer that information so that if we are concerned about partisanship, we take that into consideration with Mr. Judge's appointment.
And I'd add to that, I mean, we did receive a resume from Mr. Judge and Ms. Bogosian. And, as I looked down Mr. Judge's resume, there is a lengthy roster of political offices that Mr. Judge has held, including chairman of the Delaware County Republican Party from December 1975 until 2009, and that he serves currently as chairman emeritus of the Delaware County Republican Executive Committee since November 2009. So, I personally, while it should be certainly considered if we are concerned that his role on the Delaware County Planning Commission might be influenced through that, I'm not taking that position. But if there's concern about prior partisanship and how that might play a role by others on county council, I'd like to make that clear for the record. My concerns, again, and I don't need to go through what I said previously, but with regard to any such appointments, I think it's incumbent upon county council to do all that we can to ensure that we are putting forth folks who reflect the values and the geography of the entire Delaware County. And again, the key word is proactive. So that, again, I was not aware of the fact that the Delaware County Planning Commission would have 2 people up for appointment prior to Friday. I would have preferred that we have a few weeks' time to really be more proactive about finding folks who may be interested in serving on it. And I do have a question for yourself, if you wouldn't mind. The current commission, what is the makeup of it? How many people sit on it?
There's a 9-member board that's appointed by county council. There are volunteers that serve without compensation. They sit for 5-year staggered terms. They may be reappointed and have been reappointed. Members represent 6 planning districts, and there's 3 at-large members.
Excellent.
So do they serve for 4-year terms or 5-year? Because we're approving these for 4 years.
I will check on that for you.
Okay.
But these are 4-year terms.
Yes.
They're agreeable.
Are all seats currently full?
No.
How many vacancies are there?
Currently, there's 3 vacancies, and there's these 2 reappointments.
Okay. And again, I'm not sure the direction of this question, but what have we done to reach out to the community to fill these vacancies? And this is an important commission. I would think that we want to make sure that we have a full commission.
I can't answer that. That's not my role.
So some of these positions on the planning commission are by region, though, is that correct?
Yes, there's 6 planning districts and 3 at-large.
Excellent. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you can answer my question. Have we done anything to fill these vacancies?
Well, the vacancies are there now. We talked about this yesterday, that we became aware there was one person that was to be reappointed, and that person withdrew, did not wish to be reappointed, so that created one of the vacancies. As we announced yesterday, anybody that has an interest in serving, you should submit some letter of interest, whether that goes directly to the county clerk. Members of council may, solicit people to be members of the boards and commissions. We receive inquiries and requests from individuals to serve on specific boards or commissions, or people sometimes contact us and say, I just have an interest in serving. So as we've talked about yesterday and before the other ones here today, that's what we are doing. We can certainly look at whatever ways council may suggest to, look at how individuals come to us to serve on boards and commissions.
Okay, I will make a mirroring motion that I did on item number, I think it was 13, that we table this approval. Sorry. We table this approval for a period of 2 weeks. During such time, we can proactively reach out and solicit other people for consideration. Again, not without any judgment on whether or not Mr. Judge or Ms. Bogosian are qualified or not,